Hello and welcome back to the course Private Pilot Maneuvers. Now so far we've mastered short field landings and soft field landings, also normal landings of course, and today we'll discuss a very important skill for you as a pilot, and that's doing crosswind landings. Now just as with takeoffs, unfortunately, most of the time the wind is not blowing directly in our runway direction, so we often have to deal with at least some crosswind. For crosswind landings, first of all, it's important to know your limits. Now, in the pilot's operating handbook, you have a maximum demonstrated crosswind component. Well, that's not a hard limit, it's just the crosswind component, the maximum crosswind component that was demonstrated during flight testing. But of course, it's a good idea to adhere or to see this as a limit. There are actually two methods that you can use to perform a crosswind landing. They're a bit different, but they have the same target. And the target is to touch down with the longitudinal axis of the airplane aligned with the runway. Because if you do not apply any correction, you will just simply touch down with the nose into the wind. And this means the nose would not be pointing in runway direction. You would have heavy side loads on the landing gear, which of course is pretty bad. So the goal of every crosswind landing is actually to touch down with the nose of the airplane or the longitudinal axis aligned with the runway. The two methods are the wing low method and the crab method. It's actually up to you what you use. It's a matter of taste, preference, I would say. You can also use a combination of the two, and we'll talk about the details in a minute. So let's talk about the wing low method first. How is it done? Now, as soon as you roll out on final approach aligned with your runway, you first apply aileron into the wind. Now, if you do nothing, the airplane will start turning in that direction, of course. So what you do is you apply opposite rudder. So with the left crosswind, you will apply left aileron into the wind and right rudder, then to align the longitudinal axis with the runway direction. And then, very simply put, you're actually done. You just keep this control setup until touchdown. Of course, it's not that easy because, for example, as you reduce your speed during final approach, you will also have to adjust the control pressures, of course. It gets even more difficult during a very strong and gusty wind conditions, because if there are a lot of gusts, you will have to change and adjust the control position, aileron and rudder all the time. So this can be pretty tricky. And then you just go into the flare with those cross controls, and you will touch down with the upwind wing first, or the upwind wheel actually, hopefully. And then you will lower the other wing and finally the nose wheel. Keep in mind that as you're applying rudder still during the flare to align the airplane with the center line, also in airplanes with nose wheel steering, the nose wheel will be deflected in that direction. So just as you touch down with the nose wheel, you need to release a bit of that rudder pressure. Otherwise, the airplane, due to the nose wheel being deflected, will turn in the given direction. Okay. Now, in strong winds, with this method, it can be necessary to apply quite some control inputs. A lot of aileron, a lot of rudder. Now, if at any point during the approach you notice that even with full rudder, you still cannot keep the nose pointed in runway direction, that means it's simply too much wind. You have run out of rudder and you should abort the approach and try to find a different runway that's aligned more into the wind. You can use flaps during a crosswind landing. Flaps are generally stabilizing, but especially if the wind is very strong and gusty, you should consider a reduced flap setting. But it's just true for wind from any direction if it's very gusty. Now during the flare, the speed will naturally decrease, so you will have to adjust your control pressures, rudder and aileron accordingly. Also, resist the temptation of leveling the wings just before touchdown, because then the airplane will start to drift. So really touch down with one wing low. Now, in this upper image, you can see actually the situation when you do a wing low method final approach for a crosswind, and this will be the situation just before the flare. So you can see aileron into the wind, and the rudder is used to align the airplane with the runway center line. All right. And then let's look at another picture. This is showing us the situation during a crab approach. And let's discuss how this works. With this method, you simply apply some wind correction angle, just actually as you would in cruise flight. So you turn the nose into the wind, keep your wings level, and then the nose will still be pointed into the wind during the entire approach, and you will, so that your actual track above the ground will be in runway direction. But of course, as you approach the runway, at some point you will need to align the nose or the actual longitudinal axis with the runway. And that's the difficult part in this method. The approach is pretty simple. You just keep your crab angle, maybe adjust it a little bit if the wind speed changes. But then the tricky part is to judge the decrab. And this is simply something that you need experience for. You need to try this, you need to practice it a lot, you need some experience, and then at some point you will just get it. You will just find the perfect time where you need to kick in rudder out of the wind so that you have the airplane aligned with the runway just before touchdown. If you do it too early, then of course the airplane will start to drift. And if you do it too late, you will touch down with some side load on the landing gear. What you can actually use is a combination of the two methods. It's actually something that I like to do. So you're approaching with a decrab, with a grab, and then you decrab. By the way, if you then decrab the airplane,